anyway, she went to see this this specialist. So this oak panelled room, and she was there with her mother, and she was led and sat on this chair at the end, and she sat on her hands for 20 minutes while this man talked to her mother about all the problems Gillian was having at school. And at the end of it, because she was disturbing people, her homework was always late and so on, little kid of 8, in the end, the doctor went and sat next to Gillian and said, Gillian, I've listened to all these things that your mother's told me. I need to speak to her privately. So she said, wait here, we'll be back. We won't be very long. And they went and left her. But as they went out the room, he turned on the radio that was sitting on his desk. And when they got out the room, he said to her mother, just stand and watch her. And the minute they left the room, she said she was on her feet, moving to the music. And they watched for a few minutes, and he turned to her mother, and he said, you know, Mrs. Lynn, Gillian isn't sick. She's a dancer. Take her to a dance school. I said, what happened? Said she did. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. We walked in this room, and it was full of people like me. People who couldn't sit still. People who had to move to think. Who had to move to think. They did ballet, they did tap, they did jazz, they did modern, they did contemporary. She was eventually auditioned for the Royal Ballet School. She became a soloist. She had a wonderful career at the Royal Ballet. She eventually graduated from the Royal Ballet School, found her own company, the Gillian Dance Company, met Andrew Lloyd Webber. She's been responsible for some of the most successful musical theatre productions in history. She's given pleasure to millions, and she's a multi-millionaire. Somebody else might have put her on medication and told her to calm down. Now, I think... What I think it comes to is this. Al Gore spoke the other night about ecology and the revolution that was triggered by Rachel Carson. I believe our only hope for the future is to adopt a new conception of human ecology, one in which we start to reconstitute our conception of the richness of human capacity. Our education system has mined our minds in the way that we strip mine the earth for a particular commodity. And for the future, it won't serve us. We have to rethink the fundamental principles on which we're educating our children. There was a wonderful quote by Jonas Salk who said, if all the insects were to disappear from the earth, within 50 years, all life on earth would end. If all human beings disappeared from the earth, within 50 years, all forms of life would flourish. And he's right. What TED celebrates is the gift of the human imagination. We have to be careful now that we use this gift wisely and that we avert some of the scenarios that we've talked about. And the only way we'll do it is by seeing our creative capacities for the richness they are and seeing our children for the hope that they are. And our task is to educate their whole being so they can face this future. By the way, we may not see this future, but they will. And our job is to help them make something of it. Thank you very much.
Bueno, se entendió, ¿no? De lo que habla. Esta charla yo la vi en el 2008 y realmente me sorprendió en su momento y más que nada porque digamos que yo creo que todo el mundo pasó por la educación y sufrió o pasó por el tema de ver los procesos, cómo van coartando las libertades, ¿no? Y uno se lo vuelve a replantear cuando es padre de vuelta y tiene que plantear la educación de los hijos. Y los acompaña y los ve. Mis hijos ya son adolescentes ahora. En el 2006 estaban en la primaria. Entonces, uno trata de no cometer los errores que por ahí cometieron con nosotros o las decisiones que se tomaron con nosotros, no sé si errores o no, para tratar de ver eso. Lo que sí a mí me queda claro es que muchos de los presentes, o sea, nosotros seguimos una profesión que es una carrera dura y no tiene mucho de creatividad. Entonces, eso lo tenemos que que buscar nosotros, o sea, de acá, de los presentes. ¿Quién toca algún tipo de instrumento? Por decir, hacer algo que es completamente distinto, que tiene que ver con las artes. ¿Qué instrumento tocas, Iván? Dos. Ah, en una banda de música tenemos acá. Tres. Bien, bien. Guitarra, armónica y un poquito de piano. ¿Quién hace pintura? O pinta, o dibuja. Bien. Bueno, teatro. Ahí se le saqué otra cosa. Ninguno. Ninguno teatro. Eh, bueno, ven lo que les digo. O sea, es nuestra profesión. O sea, hacemos algo que tiene que ver con el arte, pero siempre dentro de todo lo más protegido posible y desde las sombras. O sea, tenemos por lo general una profesión que es de gente tímida, por así decirlo. Aunque algunos son un poco más extrovertidos que otros, pero no explotamos ni canalizamos ni el teatro, ni el canto, ni nada que nos exponga. O sea, tocar un instrumento, sí, toco un instrumento, toco no sé, pero ¿se han animado alguno a cantar ante un público o una cosa así? ¿O lo tocan por ustedes mismos? Nada, lo que les estoy planteando es más que nada el tema de la parte creativa y la parte de explotar eso en nosotros como un hábito eh, para vencer nuestros propios miedos, ¿no? Que lo que decía, el miedo al fracaso o el miedo a no intentarlo, que es lo que nos lleva a, a hacer lo que hacemos. Eh, Fíjense cómo se vinculan todos los temas que fuimos tratando. En la primera clase hablábamos ¿se acuerdan? Era cuando hablábamos de los pasos de del, ¿cómo se llama? Del primer paso para el lado oscuro es el miedo. Y bueno, yo lo que les quería decir no es eso, sino el tema de cómo uno se convierte en un experto y cómo uno habla este, con seguridad y con autoridad. O sea, que el conocimiento, eh, que la autoridad viene de la mano del conocimiento o de la seguridad, y la seguridad viene de la mano del conocimiento. Como nosotros muchas veces para hablar con autoridad tenemos que conocer y lo que no conocemos para no incurrir en esos pasos en falso, no lo hablamos o lo callamos. Y como a veces el hecho de no tener ese filtro o ese freno nos permite ser más lanzados, más atrevidos y arriesgarnos más. Está bueno eso de ir un poco más y ser así arriesgado e intrépido. Hay una frase que dice que el mundo es para los audaces. Y tiene que ver con eso, tiene que ver, la determinación tiene que ver con esa audacia, con ir más allá sin importar las consecuencias. Eh, y parte del proceso creativo tiene que ver con eso, con ser un poco arriesgados. Y eso era lo que quería que vieran con este video, ¿no? Hay otro video de, de Ken Robinson que es más moderno. ¿Sigo compartiendo o no sigo compartiendo? Dejé de compartirlo, ¿sí? Que les voy a poner para que lo vean. Es este. Ahí va.
I was here 4 years ago, and I remember the time that the...
Esperen que está en cámara rápida.
I was here 4 years ago, and I remember at the time that the talks weren't put online. I think they were given to TEDsters in a box set of DVDs, which they put on their shelves where they are now. And actually, Chris called me a week after I'd given my talk and said, we're going to start putting them online. Could we put yours online? I said, sure. And 4 years later, as I said, it's been seen by it's been downloaded 4 million times. So I suppose you could multiply that by 20 or something to get the number of people who've seen it. And as Chris says, there is a hunger for videos of me. Don't you feel? So this whole event has been an elaborate build-up to me doing another one for you. So here it is. Al Gore spoke at the TED conference I spoke at 4 years ago and talked about the climate crisis. And I referenced that at the end of my last talk. So I want to pick up from there because I only had 18 minutes, frankly. And so as I was saying, you see, he's right. I mean, there is a major climate crisis, obviously. And I think if people don't believe it, they should get out more. But I believe there's a second climate crisis, which is as severe, which has the same origins, and that we have to deal with the same urgency. And I mean by this, and you may say, by the way, look, I'm good. You know, I have one climate crisis. I don't really need a second one. But this is a crisis of not natural resources, though I believe that's true, but a crisis of human resources. I believe fundamentally, as many speakers have said during the past few days, that we make very poor use of our talents. Very many people go through their whole lives having no real sense of what their talents may be, or if they have any to speak of. I meet all kinds of people who don't think they're really good at anything. Actually, I kind of divide the world into two groups now. Jeremy Bentham, the great utilitarian philosopher, once spiked this argument. You know, he said there are two types of people in this world: those who divide the world into two types and those who do not. Well, well, I do. And I meet all kinds of people who don't enjoy what they do. They simply go through their lives getting on with it. They get no great pleasure from what they do. They endure it rather than enjoy it and wait for the weekend. But I also meet people who love what they do and couldn't imagine doing anything else. If you said to them, don't do this anymore, they'd wonder what you were talking about. Because it isn't what they do, it's who they are. They say, but this is me. You know, it would be foolish for me to abandon this because it speaks to my most authentic self. And it's not true of enough people. In fact, on the contrary, I think it's still true of a minority of people. And I think there are many possible explanations for it, and high among them is education. Because education, in a way, dislocates very many people from their natural talents. And human resources are like natural resources. They're often buried deep. You have to go looking for them. They're not just lying around on the surface. You have to create the circumstances where they show themselves. And you might imagine education would be the way that happens, but too often it's not. Every education system in the world is being reformed at the moment, and it's not enough. Reform is no use anymore, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need, and the word's been used many times during the course of the past few days, is not evolution, but a revolution in education. This has to be transformed into something else. One of the real challenges is to innovate fundamentally in education. Innovation is hard because it means doing something that people don't find very easy for the most part. It means challenging what we take for granted, things that we think are obvious. The great problem for reform or transformation is the tyranny of common sense. Things that people think, well, they can't be done any other way because that's the way it's done. I came across a great quote recently from Abraham Lincoln,